So over the past 6 years on the channel, we have reviewed TV stories, we've reviewed audio stories. However, there's a certain area of Doctor Who that I've virtually never touched before, and today, all that is going to change. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Penguin Random House Series 10 Doctor Who book line, with Bill, the 12th Doctor, and one story with Nardole in as well. This is all very exciting, because it's an area of Doctor Who that I've virtually wanted to review for quite a while. However, I previously thought that I wasn't really very compatible with the subject. However, as soon as I went out and actually physically started reading one of these, I read all this within the space of a month, and reviewing all 3 of them in one review. I don't particularly know if this is going to work. I don't even know if you guys are going to like it. It's a bit of a learning curve for us both. The books that I'm going to be reviewing today are The Shining Man by Cavan Scott. I'm also going to be taking a look at Plague City by Jonathan Morris, who's a big Finnish writer, so I was incredibly excited to read that one. And finally, we're going to be taking a look at the very sci-fi episode from these 3, Diamond Dogs by Mike Tucker. So firstly, I believe that all of these are pretty much available from the majority of UK decent book retailers, Waterstones, probably WH Smith. I don't know, I've not seen a Doctor Who section in there for quite a while though. However, if you don't have one of those shops nearby, you can always get them off Amazon. I think Penguin directly as well, somewhere like that. Basically, books are quite easy to find, so go out and find one, because I highly recommend reading these ones, even if you've not read a book in quite a while, because neither have I. Probably the last book that I fully read altogether was probably when I was 3, and that was Mr. Tickle. Firstly, I'm going to be starting off with The Shining Man, because this is the one that I started with. I don't believe that these have any particular order. Continuity-wise, I know quite a lot of people were curious of where these fit into Series 10. I do believe the first 2, Diamond Dogs and The Shining Man, as they're both the 12th Doctor and Bill, I'm presuming that they take place earlier on in the series, maybe between Thin Ice and the one following Thin Ice, whatever that one was, Knock Knock, somewhere around there. And then I do believe that Plague City, I'm getting a little bit of an impression that that may be later on, because it does have Nardole in, so I'm presuming that's sort of after Oxygen, when he went on the TARDIS for the first time for an actual adventure in the TV show. So yeah, I don't particularly know. I'm guessing once the series actually finishes, we'll get to know properly, because so far from what I'm getting, one of the writers on Twitter was going to say, however, he realised he shouldn't because of like Series 10 spoilers and things like that. So yeah, basically, they're scattered around Series 10. There's not really any particular order that you need to read them in. There is a few references here and there, which is nice to see, to the early parts of the series, such as like the emoji bots and the creature under the Thames, and generally things like Penguin with his arse on fire as well. It is very continuity to an extent, and does like feel very consistent with the TV show itself. Anyway, firstly, I'm going to be taking a look at The Shining Man, because as I said, this is the one that I started with. Cavan Scott has written quite a lot of Doctor Who in the past for the paperback sort of format for I do believe Titan. He wrote the 9th Doctor comic line, so I was rather excited to read this one. You do sort of get the impression with it to start with, it's going to be one of those standard sort of gothic horror style of stories where you have sort of a ghost story maybe in there, or a little bit of a haunting or something like that, and that is sort of the impression that you get for the majority of it to start with, because we have sort of this creature that follows people around on street corners. It sort of haunts in the background. I must admit, the description that it gives is in fact rather terrifying, the way that it sort of just lurks in the background with these massive glowing eyes. We have a few people going missing as well, such as the mother, who is Sammy Holland, and we have sort of the whole story throughout sort of bouncing around the kids and the emotions that they have, and Noah and Maisie Holland, which the majority of the story is sort of told through their eyes. In a way, we have sort of the disappearance of their mother and how that affects them, and the way that the Doctor almost needs to sort of parent them to an extent to figure out the problem. I think that if this was in the TV show, it would be rather interesting to see the Doctor in this situation, because I think the way that it's written, Cavan Scott really does get the 12th Doctor incredibly well, sort of balancing out that childish side as well as that caring side towards the kids. Bill is also very good for this one. I think that we have a few moments with her where we meet a character that is a vlogger throughout this one, so it's very interesting to see a few of the 21st century elements in there, something of which that the TV show is sort of trying to incorporate in. However, this one gets directly in with that. We get vloggers in there, YouTubers, and all sorts of little things that you would expect sort of in modern day internet technology type of stuff, which I think is rather good, because we've not really had an episode that is very quite modern up to what it is actually like today, so it was good to see that. Anyway, we have sort of this haunting element to start with, and then that later develops in the story where you sort of think things are going to be resolved. However, we end up sort of going into a fairy tale dimension, which I must admit, when I first sort of got the impression of Doctor Who and fairy tales, I wouldn't exactly expect them to go hand in hand together. However, over the past 2 years, I have been exposed to 2 different fairy tale style of formats. Firstly with this one, and secondly with a Big Finish audio that was in the unbanned Bernie Summerfield line. I think it was called Little Things or something like that. It was the one with things in the title in the Bernie Summerfield volume that was released last year, and that one had unicorns in and somehow worked. This one has sort of a fairy tale style of format with literal fairies in a fairyland where you go there and you physically can't see things because it's too bright, and it sort of adds a very alien style of fairy format in there. I do even believe we get a few references to the fairies that are seen in Torchwood, because I know that was a very dark interpretation of what fairies are like. And yeah, I think that this story does incorporate in that darker element, and I think that generally it does have that darker shroud running all the way through. The setting was Manchester, I do believe, as well, or it does specifically say on here, because I did forget, Huckensall, which I believe that is the equivalent to sort of a smaller town out of Manchester, I think, somewhere like that. Basically, it's in England and it's in modern times, and those ones that is a rather, we don't get to see sort of an average plot outside of London, so it's nice to have something thrown out there that is in fact different and something new, which is good to see. Shining Men have this power where they can basically take people out of time and then take them to their dimension where time runs a little bit faster, and then once they're sort of implanted in back to where the sort of modern normal Earth is, they end up aging quite a lot. It reminded me a little bit of the Weeping Angels taking people back in time. However, it is slightly different, but I love the way that the time sort of runs differently in this other dimension. The policewoman that we're introduced to acts as a little bit of a companion for the second half of the story. I think that the Doctor slowly sort of gets a nice little relationship with her. To start with, I think that the relationship that they have is a little bit unstable. They don't really tend to get... A police officer doesn't like the way that the Doctor is intruding on this criminal investigation, and then slowly throughout the story, when she's took to the fairy dimension, do in fact get a little bit more of that bonding in there, and towards the very end especially, we have them coming together and in fact sort of saving the day to an extent. And the way that the fairy thing is done, I just get, as soon as I mention fairies in Doctor Who, I automatically do think a little bit cringy. However, this one is done to the extent where it's not cringy whatsoever. Even the stuff where you would think, oh, that is slightly cringy, such as Fairyland, you know, it is rather well interpreted, I think, especially within this story. I think that the way that it is done, it's not too cringy, it's not even too childish, to be honest. It's sort of those fairy elements done to an adult audience, which I know is something that is done quite a lot in the media these days, so it's nice to see it interpreted in a Doctor Who story. We also have a few references to myths and things in there as well, which is good to see. I love the way that we have sort of a few that even go to a library at one point within this story and read through the past of the town, and the way that the fairies use this type of wood to keep certain people out and certain people within prisons and things like that. And I love the way it sort of harks back into actual sort of mythology to an extent and what people used to believe, and that once again that idea of ghost stories continues, and that is a thing throughout this. We do have the idea of ghost stories, conspiracies, and even towards the very start of this one with the Shining Man itself, the way that it looks around the streets, we have a few people that are imagining it to be a little bit of a viral thing that goes around on the internet because people have filmed them. The vlogger that we meet is based particularly around the Shining Men and going to see them in this forest that is located nearby, which allows for some really spooky scenes that I really did enjoy, especially with the 2 younger children that are very innocent. I think the way that they act upon that, I think, is incredibly good as well. And I love the way, I'm pretty sure it does say at some point that Cavan Scott probably got the idea for this story in the sort of clown phase that we had about a year or so ago, maybe even it was in 2015, I don't know, when people thought it was a good idea to walk around the streets with a clown mask on and a knife and expect not to be arrested or anything like that. But yeah, that was a thing that did go around because we're all very weird, aren't we? But I think that definitely the idea may have sprouted from that. I think it's a very good idea to do with Doctor Who, because what if that thing that everybody is doing just to annoy each other to go viral on the internet is in fact an alien thing altogether? So yeah, that is a very good plot to premise this on, I think. So overall for this one, I think it's a rather good read. I probably enjoyed this, in fact, out of all of them, maybe the second most enjoyable, I would say, even though it was the first one that I read. I think it's based very much, a lot of areas of fandom can probably get different parts from this, and I know that a lot of the younger people will enjoy the fairy idea. However, there's a lot of the darker elements that the older part of the fandom will like as well, which I think is a good thing about these. I've sort of soon come to realise that there isn't really a direct demographic for these, and a lot of different age groups can enjoy them. So yeah, overall for The Shining Man, a really good read, and I literally read this in less than 24 hours, and it's like 250 pages long. So this is officially, to date, the quickest thing that I've ever read in my life. So that alone shows it's quite good. Next up, we've got Plague City. Now this one is just compliments heavy, honestly. It's firstly set in Edinburgh when the plague was going around and everybody was dying. So automatically we've got history, tick in the box for me. We've got illness and death, tick in the box for me. Playing with emotions, tick in the box for me. And a general quite grim theme throughout, tick in the box for me. It's a grim one and a gothic one, and I quite like that. So yeah, this one in fact has Nardole in. It's the only one throughout this whole set, which leads me to believe it's sort of set slightly later on in Series 10. It is based around the idea of the Doctor, Bill and Nardole going to the plague. They don't realise that there's a plague going around because they would of course try to avoid it. And we have the idea of your average sort of historical plague Doctor with a massive duck beak, which to be quite honest, I'm surprised that it's not been done in Doctor Who before, honestly. I could imagine this being a big Finish story. Hence why it's written by a bloody good writer. Honestly, Jonathan Morris, I'm very quickly getting more and more respect for him as I listen to more of his stories, because he does things that you would assume would be quite a stereotypical Doctor Who story, and then twisting that even further, such as seen in the recent Big Finish monthly range story, Vortex Ice, because that incorporated in the idea of the companion having sort of the side effects of what the Doctor does. Such a good setting, having sort of that old period, and the way that we have a lot of great description of having sort of the very small streets and the big towering buildings over and the very dark alleyways. The way that it is visually described in this one, once again, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I could imagine it in my head constantly throughout the entirety. I was picturing this sort of old sort of street landscape with a lot of nearly dead people wandering around, and the way that the ghosts, once again, another thing, it is quite a ghostly story. Ghosts of people that have previously died plague are coming back to haunt the people and their families, which I think is a grim idea, however works incredibly well. This whole thing plays with emotions, and that very quickly gets lost and separated from the Doctor and meets these two elderly people who are sort of not in fact affected by the plague, or at least that's what we think, and we have them sort of going through daily life, and Bill needs to go and get food for them because she feels that she needs to return a favour in somewhere for letting her stay for the night. I think that just the way that it's set, it feels very classic. It feels that the Doctor, Bill and Nardole have really gone into this time and sort of settled down for a while, needing to sleep with certain people in their houses and sort of use their lodgings to even do normal human things. Nardole has some nice moments in there as well. It's very interesting to see him in this format, and to be quite honest, there is a scene later on where Nardole sort of gets involved with the alien, and the alien uses him to sort of speak through to an extent, and we even have this very emotional scene towards Nardole and the Doctor together. And if that was actually pictured in the TV show itself and visualised, I could imagine a lot of people getting a lot more respect for Nardole, and I know that a lot of people will base their opinions of Nardole for the TV show itself. However, if you want more sort of opinions of Nardole's, I really do recommend this one because it has a few interesting elements in there that really make me respect him a lot more. And not gonna lie, since I've read this one, my opinion of him in the TV show has sort of altered as well to be a little bit better, so that's quite good. Like in the previous story where we had Noah and Maisie, I think in this one we have a very much a basing around a family that have just lost their daughter. Once again, a very sort of child element that has been played with, and the emotions of her coming back to life constantly, and the grief that is sparked from this, that the monster that we later find out, it doesn't understand grief and it doesn't like it, so it sort of inflicts that happiness in there, which there in theory causes more grief because it doesn't understand how humans work. And the family that we get used to are there throughout the whole duration, and I love the way that that works because we really do see the time period through their eyes. And I think one of the main ways to have an historic episode is really sort of getting to grips with a certain person or people from that period to really get the perspective from their eyes in the way that the sort of current period is affecting them. And that for this story we had a few emotional moments in there where the two parents were in fact coming to terms with the fact that their daughter had died, and then the haunting of her coming back every single night to just sort of stare at them, which would be a little bit creepy, let's admit. Regardless, if you want to see sort of your now deceased family relative again, I would know that I wouldn't want to wake up and just see them staring at you at the end of the bed. Not gonna lie, I will be slightly creeped out by that, and I think the majority of the population would be. But yeah, it's one of those things that I love the way that this incorporated in that alien element. Once again, much like The Shining Man, we do very much get used to that setting. However, by the very end of it, it throws everything out the water to have that very sci-fi element in there. It turns out that an alien spaceship has landed within the volcano at Edinburgh, and it's sort of holding back the eruption, and the fact that everybody in Edinburgh is sad makes that creature sad. Sort of, it's quite a sad thing, not using the word sad too much, because it makes you very sympathetic and sort of you don't understand what to trust. However, slowly because of this this, the grief turns against the creature that is in the volcano, and slowly we are going to get this eruption that is eventually going to wipe out the entirety of Edinburgh. You do get a little bit of a sacrifice, sort of, to an extent, but once again, this story does play with the idea of who you can save. You can't rewrite history, not one line. We get some excellent moments in there where the Doctor goes, we can't save anybody. He's even cautious about letting Bill go and get food for these people by using little golden coins in the TARDIS. And then we have the Doctor saving this other person, and then another, and we just have sort of, where do you draw the line? That is a constant theme throughout this story, which I absolutely adored. The main person in charge being saved by the Doctor, who used sort of the medicine and the TARDIS to save him. A few other elements in there as well that I'm not going to spoil, because I think very much for this one you need to really keep guessing all the way through. But by the very end, there's something that I didn't expect at all happening, and it really does bring the story full circle. It's not exactly timey-wimey, however, it is a little bit of that to an extent, but not too complicated, and I love the way that it's used, because Jonathan Morris really does use that to a benefit, the way that we have where you can travel in time, so why not do this, you know? So it does really work, and I think that the way that it's done, it doesn't cheat anything at the very end, and I love the way it sort of reminds me a little bit of End of the World. At the very end of the story, we do in fact go to Edinburgh in modern day, much like how the Doctor wanted at the very start of the story, and we see people sort of going about their normal lives and being happy, and we still have that theme there of what they've all seen. And I'm not going to spoil it, but we do have a little moment at the end that really does make me think, oh, that's nice. And if I could class this episode within the ranking of Series 10 at the very end, I could probably imagine this being quite close up there as being one of my favourite episodes of the series, along with Oxygen and Thin Ice. Honestly, I adored this one. Down, one to go. This one's Diamond Dogs by Mike Tucker. Now, he's done quite a bit of Doctor Who in the past, I do believe, for the writing side of things, and I like to refer to this one as the proper sci-fi-ish one for the rest of them, because I think the others, they are sci-fi, don't get me wrong, because it's Doctor Who, so it can, like, not be sci-fi, but with this one, it is very much sci-fi. It reminds me of 42 to an extent, where we have not the best spaceship in the world, we have literally the human empire just about to expand, so the setting that it's in is quite grim. I could imagine it being very industrial, having pipes and smoke everywhere, and it is very close to home as well. It's in fact based on Saturn, or sort of around Saturn to an extent. It's on the Colo Zanister Mining Faculty 27. I always forget the number at the very end, but yeah, it's sort of like your average mining sort of spaceship to an extent that is mining down into Saturn to get diamonds. I love the way, I do believe it says somewhere on this one, here on Saturn it literally rains diamonds, and I just want to get straight away to the very end where we do in fact have a scene like that, which honestly I would love to see in the TV series itself, just having the TARDIS there and diamonds everywhere. Honestly, I just think with this one, as I say, we have a few more of those elements in there that I think are very much sci-fi. I could imagine this one being very early on in the run. I think above all the others, I think this one could possibly be near the very start, because we have maybe even straight after Thin Ice or something like that, because we do have that element in there where Bill is still very new to the TARDIS. She's still not really she's surprisingly not really very happy about going to Saturn, because she thinks it's a little bit dull. The Doctor wants to go to steal a diamond because they need to pay for stuff on Earth, which I love straight away. Basically, he wants to go to this planet, nick one diamond, take it back to Earth, get some money for it so they can live off it. So we have Nardole and that, because they do need to live off things off Earth, because the Doctor is down there constantly in sort of this non-official type of exile type thing that we've currently got going on in Series 10. So once again, much like the previous stories, we have those elements going all the way through, and just those little things like that, which some people like me do ask. The Doctor's been on Earth for a while now. How is he surviving? Where is he sleeping? So we have the college, and then we have him. How is he affording money and food and things like that? By stealing diamonds from Saturn, taking them in and trading them in for money, which I think is perfect the way that it's done. Just little things like that answers little questions that aren't necessarily important, but it just makes it feel slightly more real. I don't even know what to say for the monster villain for this one, because it's not exactly a villain, but it is a villain. I don't really know. I don't really want to say about it, because I think that would spoil it at the very end, which is a similar thing for the rest of them as well. I want to sort of keep them very brief, as I have done, because I just think there's some parts, especially with reading, where you start the story and you don't naturally want to know the end. It's like in Of Mice and Men, when somebody helpfully wrote, Lenny dies at the very end on the first page in my school copy. Thanks, person, for that. I will never forgive you. But yeah, that is a thing that, honestly, I just think with this one, we have this alien creature that we don't really get to know at all. We don't even, thinking about it, we don't really see them to an extent until the very end, because they are sort of a liquid-based gaseous creature, I think, which once again, this would be very hard to interpret in the TV show itself. However, much like 42, we have the element of this creature doing something with spacesuits, which makes it into a physical entity, the way that we have sort of them going around the spaceship and things like that. Initially, they want to claim asylum, which that ends up sort of backfiring a little bit towards the very end, to say the very least. But yeah, we have a few things going on. The spaceship that they're currently on, or the mining faculty even, is currently going under a little bit of a sort of evaluation. We have the people coming in from the sort of human empire to evaluate everything, to see if everything's going straight, and naturally things do not go straight. Everything goes kaput because things start going wrong, spaceships don't end up docking on time and things like that. Then the Doctor arrives trying to steal a diamond, and then the people catch him in the act because Bill accidentally crosses over this barrier, setting off the alarms. I think that with this one, Bill very much gets a little bit more limelight than she would do in the TV series, because she has a few more things to do, and the relationship that she has with the Doctor, we have a number of occasions where, in fact, we have them hugging to an extent near the very end, and I think that the relationship that they have in this one is a little bit stronger than we do have in other stories as well. Much like the previous story, where we had certain elements told out the eyes of different characters, such as in the first one we have the kids, and then in Plague City we have the family. In this one we get a little bit of a sort of, the Doctor takes one of the scientific people, Laura Palmer, to outside of Saturn, and we have her experiencing the sort of outer rings of Saturn, and we get some really nice dialogue from her, the way that we have a few bits from her perspective. At the very beginning, in fact, have a prologue, and whatever the ending bits from, I don't know what you call book things. I need to get used to book terminology still. We have a prologue at the very beginning. Believe it or not, I did get an A in English literature. Yeah, I still do not know these slight elements. And then we have at the very end an apology. Is that what it's called? I don't know. An apology and a prologue. That's a thing that books have. But yeah, a little bit at the very beginning, introducing her, going back out for her final time on Saturn. Then at the very end, we have sort of her looking out at the spaceship, out at the rings at Saturn. Even though everything has happened, she still thinks it's beautiful, and seeing all these things from her perspective and how she's affected once again by the story is very nice and a good breath of fresh air. And once again, the Doctor takes her on board the TARDIS for this part of the story. He leaves Bill on the Colo Zanister, and he lets Laura Palmer come on board the TARDIS and help him in sort of the spaceship that is seen. And we have to sort of not say directly what happens, but yeah, we sort of have them going to this spaceship. It helps the Doctor to an extent, because she's very passionate about space, and once again, as I say, we do get a few lovely points from her perspective, which I really do like. A little gripe for this one, which isn't really much of a gripe, it's just down to personal preference, which I know a few people will love this one because of these elements. It's just down to an opinion, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it is bad in any way. This one is set in space. Naturally, it does have quite a lot more space technobabble stuff that you don't have in all the others, because others are based on Earth, meaning some people will like that. Surprisingly, considering this is a sci-fi show, you would expect me to sort of like the ones where we go out into space and experience things that aren't earthly a little bit more. For me, I don't know, I just found sort of some of the names. We have a few complicated ones such as Genlos, we have Deliski or Delesky, I just think there's a few, or even the Cancri as well, which do get a little bit of a revelation with them. But yeah, we have a few complicated names here and there that naturally you do sort of need to have a little bit of time to get used to. However, I think it works quite well to an extent. It really bases that sci-fi setting. For me personally, I didn't really get on with that too well. However, I still enjoyed the book. It was just a few complicated little elements in there that I thought were a little bit to an extent, but there is some points in there as well that I really did like. So I think that generally, down to personal interpretation, if you do like the sci-fi elements, then you will like this one possibly above the others. However, for me, I'm much more of that Earth-based historical person that likes the historic stuff, meaning less technobabble. So yeah, it just generally depends on your personal preference, but I still did like this one for what it was. I thought the sci-fi elements that it pictured, it gave a very good and very detailed setting of how space works, what the spaceship is doing. We got to know exactly what the mining faculty were doing, how the procedures worked, what ports went in where, what the deals were with different things. It based this excellent picture that I think a lot of the TV stories do in fact miss to an extent. I just think, as I say, still did like it. I just think that sometimes the technobabble of space related stuff and engines and pipes and all that can be a little bit confusing, but yeah, still a good story. Something I can say for all of them, I think that considering they are written by 3 different writers, Bill and the 12th Doctor, and Nardole to an extent, all feel incredibly consistent. They all feel like the same person, even though they're based around different writers. They've all sort of gone off what the TV show offers. I do believe they were probably given external samples of the series itself. I do believe Jonathan Morris put on Twitter that he got a little bit of a preview of what Bill would be like, sort of. That very much does come across within his story, once again, having a few references here and there to the TV show itself. So much like all of them, this story, Diamond Dogs, does in fact have some very, once again, relating to the series elements in there. Thoroughly enjoyed, in fact, having a little bit more of Bill and the 12th Doctor together, especially the fact that we're getting less and less 12th Doctor as the weeks go down now, because he's eventually leaving at Christmas. At the same time, we're probably not going to get that much Bill. I'm going to be very surprised if Bill does in fact get beyond Series 10 and onto the next Doctor as well. So at the point of possibly having this companion for only a year, having more stories in the novel form is a good thing to have, because you do have theoretically 3 extra adventures to really get used to Bill in, which something for this is really good. So yeah, that's that. That's all 3 of them done with. And once again, I just think, considering, as I say, I'm not much of a reading person, and I read literally all of this within less than a month, and I had my exams as well, in a way I sort of used it as a little bit of a thing of, right, you've done revision, now you can treat yourself. I would have never thought that I would have been able to do that, of literally going, right, reward yourself by reading, because honestly, it is such a nice thing to do on an evening, so I highly recommend doing it if you're one of those people that isn't really into reading like me, as I quoted a few months ago. But yeah, it's one of those things I just think, if you're into the Bill and the 12th Doctor era currently on TV, then these are really good compliments to Series 10 as a whole. I think that they're just nice little additions to run along with the series itself. They are, I do believe, recommended retail of £6.99. I do believe they may be £1 off on Amazon, so yeah, I highly recommend buying these, because they are all good in their own right. And I really hope you've enjoyed this review, considering it's been, in fact, very different to normal. I realise that not really many people cover the books on YouTube, so as I say, even though it's something different, I hope you've all enjoyed it. And with that in mind, my next book review will be Brief History of the Time Lords. It's just been released, so I hope you'll all be looking forward to that whenever that occurs at some point, hopefully in the near future. Thanks for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a big like. Please subscribe if you're not already. If you have any questions, please do leave them below, and I'll be sure to answer them at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next time. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.